Have you ever had a feeling that someone's watching you, or the sensation of someone following you? Many more feelings and sensations for this is the After Dark podcast. Welcome back, guys, to Ep.5 of the After Dark podcast. 5 episodes in, we're still going strong. So, how are you guys today? How are you guys tonight? Hopefully you guys had a really good day, and hopefully you guys are having a really good evening tonight. Let me see. It was sunny today. I mean, there was a hint of clouds up in the sky, and I'm not gonna lie, it looked kind of pretty up in the sky. But it was sunny, but the air didn't feel so much hot as to it felt more cool. So that was a plus. So let me quickly get rid of these tags on YouTube and ye old Twitter, and we will begin. So how are you guys today? How are you guys tonight? Hopefully you guys are doing awesome and are gonna enjoy the very first week of October. Such an amazing feeling. Very first week of October, and the very first week of the podcast. We are almost in our first week. I should do something special for the first week, right? I mean, it all depends, of course, if you guys want. I may not be the best reader in the world, but I do try my best, and I do enjoy making this podcast, so please bear with me. Yesterday we were talking about a lot of things. We were talking about ghosts and double gangers, and how ghosts can also be caring and destructive at times. So I wonder what stories we have today. No, I mean, I really do wonder why, what we got, because, you know, it is what it is. I should start reading some creepypastas as well. I mean, creepypastas to me are made up stories, right? It's a figment of someone's imagination, and just, written in words, which is pretty cool. Just a couple more tags, and we will be golden ongoing live in a bit. Just give me a couple more. Yeah. Okay, so I guess we are golden to begin today's journey into the unknown. Okay. So let me get this out of the way. It is very lively outside of my apartment. It sounds like if somebody's having a party. And while we are here reading some scary stories with you guys, so I would rather stay inside telling scary stories than being outside with all the noise. You know what I mean? When you go to parties, okay. Well, back then, okay, when I was younger, my mom would always get invited to parties, like family parties, of course, and I would get dragged in, right? So back then, having no phone would be like just staring into space, be like, oh, I hope something happens, you know? But nowadays, you have your phone out in parties, right? And you just seem distracted from whatever is around you, that you don't know when somebody is calling you, or just, trying to get your attention. Same thing when you're home. When you're home alone, you just whip out your phone, and all of a sudden the existing world around you just blacks out, and you're tunnel visioning on your phone only. But what if we're in our phones, right? And all of a sudden something happened, something that startled us. Like when we were talking about a couple episodes ago, where you would see something in your peripheral vision, right? Like you're just so focused on your phone that all of a sudden you see a shadow just like crossing your view, but just so it's like a small glimpse that it makes you turn around, right? Like you break all concentration from your phone and you just turn around to see what it was, and maybe it was a fly or maybe something else. So in this podcast, the fashion of this podcast, I like to tell a personal story of my own. And I was thinking very hard, very hard as to what to tell you guys, because I don't know. And like yesterday, I ended off with a dream, right? So my dream that I had a while back was that my dad pretty much took me to what he considered the end, with a bunch of faceless people that didn't do anything. And amongst the sea of faceless people, my dad would pop out and would welcome me to the end with open arms and said, "This is the end." And I woke up. Dreams are a weird thing, because it doesn't exist, but at the same time they do, because that's where deja vu comes in, right? Like you're just dreaming away something or other, right? But then the next thing you know, you completely forget about it. But it could be years later or 2 days later where that dream becomes reality. Like to me, for example, when I told you guys, deja vu happened to me twice. Okay, and now it wasn't something scary, right? But it was more of a personal thing, like not a personal thing, because I actually wanted it. In my dream, I was holding a white case, and I was so happy to have it. A couple weeks later, I see myself holding that same white case, but it turned out to be a Game Boy Advance game, So deja vu it's like a double-edged sword. It can work with you or against you, and we hope to God it never really, works against us, because it's like an old wives' tale, and I've been told by countless people, and my mom included, that if you tell your dream to anybody within a certain time, it will come true. Okay? Or, I mean, it won't come true. My bad. So, if you have a nightmare, what is the first thing you do if you have a spouse right next to you? You wake them up, or you wait for them to wake up and say, "Hey, I had a nightmare." And you proceed to tell it. When I have nightmares, of course, I just want to get that out of the way as soon as they can. Like the first person I see, it could be you guys walking down the street and be like, "Hey, you guys have a second? I had a nightmare. Let me tell you about it." You guys have like a couple seconds maybe just to hear me out. What do you guys think? Do you guys believe what you guys see in dreams, or do you guys remember any dreams at all? I would like to know. I would genuinely like to know. Okay. So, personal story. I was living again in back in East LA by Cesar Chavez Street. The street that crossed, actually the street that met Cesar Chavez was called Chicago Street, right? And I used to live in an apartment where there was a bunch of gang activities at the time, all right? But we didn't want to get involved, so we just let it happen. We were cool with the people, and the people knew who we were, so they gave us respect and we gave it back. Anyways, that's beside the point. The point is, one day I was alone, and I believe I had work off that day, and at the time I was working in at a OBGYN clinic. I am a nurse after all, and at that particular day I had my day off, so I stayed home. My mom would probably, I think she was with her kid, like with her daughter somewhere else, I don't know, but I was alone. And what was I doing? I was just minding my own business, playing video games, doing what you do on your day off, right? Go to YouTube, see videos, hear podcasts like you guys are watching right now or hearing right now, because like I did say, this is just audio, not visual, but I do like to keep a GIF running, which by the way, I do not own none of the GIF that you guys see in the screen. I just pick them out of Google. Okay. And well, so yeah, so I'm alone, nothing to nothing to do, right? But when I was going to the bathroom, I clearly heard somebody say, "And the diamonds," like in a way you would ask a question, "And the diamonds?" Like that's it. That's all I heard. I turned around, and of course, it was just a disembodied voice, or it could be a figment of my imagination. Do you guys believe in ghosts? If you guys don't believe in ghosts, would it change your mind if you guys had an experience? For example, hearing a disembodied voice, or just getting brushed in the shoulder lightly. You turned around to see your friends giggling, a couple feet behind you, or when you're alone, all you feel is your hand being tugged. Would you be a believer then, or would you still keep on your beliefs? You know. Yesterday we had a story about this old man who was sitting on his rocking chair in his porch, and all of a sudden he heard his wife calling him for dinner. But in the story it mentioned that his wife had died recently, right? So there was no way, but he obliged to the calling, and he got out of the chair, and all of a sudden I believe it was a rain gutter that fell on it and completely destroyed the chair. So if it wasn't for the ghost, wouldn't you think the old man would have been hurt, or possibly even worse, dead? What do you guys think? What do you guys think of the supernatural? I believe in it. I believe in ghosts, ghostesses, and in demonesses. I do. I really do. Disembodied voices. Now, the only thing I don't like to see are orbs. In pictures that they claim to have capture a ghost, and then they show me orbs. I go like, okay, this could be a speck of dirt or a bug. Like, come on, show me shadows, please. Okay, that's what I want to see. So this story is on the website called theoccultmuseum.com, and it's by the same authors of the website, by Occult Museum. There's a quote at the bottom of the header. It says, "After that day, I never heard a single voice again. I do not like to imagine what was waiting downstairs for me tonight." Okay. So these are 7 stories, and these are quite long. So let me take a sip of my water, and we will begin. This first one has no author, but it's called "The Figure in Dark Robes." I told this to a select few, and while creepiest, scariest subject in the context of my life, it truly is the creepiest and scariest unsolved mystery. I was a freshman in high school in my town of Lacrosse, I can't really pronounce, Wisconsin. I was sleeping over at a friend at my friend Tom's house. We were watching a movie in his living room when he suddenly got a phone call. I watched as he listened to what was being said on the other line. I watched as emotions poured over his face as he threw the phone across the room. After moments of crying, he told me that a boy at my school had committed suicide. Now, I know this boy only through seeing him in halls. My friend Tom and I didn't go to the same school, but Tom had gone to middle school with this boy. Apparently, Tom bullied him during those years. He wasn't proud of it, and to be honest, I was pretty surprised because he was a great guy. He had utter remorse. We decided to sneak out and go for a walk. The year was roughly 1990, maybe 1991. We were freshmen in high school. Now sneaking out was nothing new. We always did it. And at the time we didn't do drugs, alcohol, or partying. We just liked the freedom of walking in the streets at night. The discussions were always great. Normally we'd go walk through the big cemetery that was near my house. It was behind the train tracks that still run through La Crosse this day. We loved the danger of the cemetery, the scares. We were kids. It was a rite of passage as we walk along the train tracks leading to the cemetery. We stopped. To this day, I can't explain why we had walked into the cemetery dozens of times and on scarier nights. For whatever reason, we didn't want to go in there. I don't know if the thought of death on our minds due to the classmate's suicide was a factor. Perhaps. Regardless, without really saying anything to each other, we stopped, turned around, and decided to head down a nearby street. Now, in retrospect, I do have to say that throughout this walk, things seemed off. There wasn't a car in sight. This was suburbia. Even walking through this town, Main Street was odd because there just weren't any cars. Odd. It was roughly after midnight. It was a weekend night. Where was everybody? Perhaps just a strange coincidence. Lastly, there was something in the air. Both Tom and I felt it. We brought it up. It feels weird tonight. The air, the lights. So we decided to walk down a dead-end street. At the end of the street was a ditch with a simple up and down and up trail that led to the street that I lived on. Simple enough. Keep in mind, as I get into the horrifying part of the story, that we were in the suburbs. These weren't old, creepy houses with strange individuals, and the trees were small. It wasn't a brand new development, but it wasn't that old either. So as Tom and I were walking down the street, we're looking down the road beneath our feet as we talk. I don't remember the exact conversation at the particular moment. Perhaps we were talking about the tragedy of that night, but it could just have easily been about Star Wars or Akira. As we approached the dead end, which was a few houses away, Tom and I suddenly stopped. We did so at the same time, without saying a word to each other. Our heads slowly turned towards each other, both sensing something in the air. The hair of our arms and backs of our necks standing high, then our gaze slowly moved forward in unison, slightly and to the right. That's when we saw it. About 2 houses away, in a virtually barren front yard of a suburban home, beside some bushes, was a dark figure. It was someone, or something in dark robes. No face, no features at all, just the robe. Now, this figure didn't acknowledge us, not yet. It instead walked or moved in a certain way I can't articulate it correctly. As if it was walking in circles slowly. Without really walking, it held something that was blowing in the wind. And yes, the wind picked up a little bit as well. Another odd element was the light that illuminated somewhat. There was a street light a few houses up, but it wasn't strong enough to illuminate this figure, as it was. Tom and I froze. In fact, I'm almost frozen as I write this. It's been a while since I have thought about this night. So there we stood frozen in fear, staring at the dark figure moving, yet doing so without moving, and it was holding something. Or perhaps what was blowing in the wind was more of its robe. I'm not sure. We stared at this thing for I don't know how long until it stopped. It suddenly looked up at us, as if finally alarmed by our presence. That was enough for us. We ran as fast as we could. We cut through a side street that was just to lead us to a parallel street towards my neighborhood. This street led us a slight hill. As we rounded the corner and started running up the hill in panic, we stopped, because on top of that hill we saw another dark figure with his arms raised. We turned around and ran away in the direction of Tom's house, which at this distance was at least 5 miles away. We ran and time stood still. The next thing I remember, we're lying in the middle of a courtyard of some other neighborhood that we'd never been in, gasping for breath. We sat up and without saying a word, we walked in silence back to his house. The air felt normal again, although we felt like we were in a haze of sorts, albeit out of danger. We fell asleep in his house. I woke up that morning and went home. A few days later, I rode my bike to the location. Perhaps it was shadow play. Perhaps there was a certain tree or bush. Or maybe a for sale sign or something that made it look like there was something there. Nothing was there. It was an open yard. Tom and I didn't speak of that night for a long time. Years later, when I brought it up, he replied, "Yeah, what the hell was that?" As if no time had passed. What was it? I have no idea. We hadn't taken any drugs. We hadn't been drinking any alcohol. I often wonder if I could have been haunting, a specter, a ghost, etc. Maybe it was an alien abduction or sighting. We saw no craft, but there was an unexplained light. Or maybe it was some other kid messing with us. But how would they have known we were coming? How could they be so prepared? I just don't know. That was roughly 24 years ago, give or take. And yes, this is a true story. Sadly, my best friend Tom passed suddenly a few months ago. I thought of this night during his funeral. I thought of returning to the site. I thought of the odd consequences of an unexpected and surprising death, just like my classmate that night. Is there a connection? Were we seeing some future fate for one of us, which sadly fell upon my best friend Tom? Was this all some dual hallucination in our mind? No way. It haunts me at times. Oh, and this story was written by Ken Miyamoto. The shadow. Shadow figures and just shadow in general. Very odd things. Light, we see light as a safe point, right? But even if you're in a room full of it, there's bound to be shadows underneath your feet, right? So, would you be afraid? What if this thing actually happened to you? What if maybe you were driving home and all of a sudden you see something unexpected to your right? Or what if you were on an Uber, right? And all of a sudden you see somebody just right there. Or you're coming home, hitching a ride on the bus, or even on a train, which some of them still run underground, right? What would you do? If you didn't believe in such things, would that make you a believer? Would you run in fear and question your own logic, or would you stay and face it? Would you confront this being in front of you? Would you go up to it, or would you leave it alone? But either way, wouldn't it have consequences if you would have confronted? How would that being or thing react? If you would have left it alone and just walked away, what if it started following you? In this story, the kids ran away. So, what would you do? Speaking of shadowy figures, I just remembered the story, the real story that I was going to start this podcast off. Okay, so yes, we'll keep the whole disembodied thing that happened to me, but I'll tell you the story after another story that we're going to read right now. Okay, just my screen went black. Stop doing that, please. Thank you. This next one's called The Little Boy with No Eyes, and it's on the same website. One night, when I was 10, I was asleep in bed and was woken up by my bedroom door opening, then someone sitting in my face. I felt a graze in my leg and the bed sank as they sat. Thinking it was my mom having something to tell me, I opened my eyes only to see a pale, eyeless, just black, empty socket. Boy who just seemed to be my age, sitting at the foot of my bed and with his legs crossed, staring at me, or facing my direction since he had no eyes. He then reached his hand towards me and he was holding what looked like a little black box. I was freaked out, but as I reached to grab it, he hesitantly pulled it back. I reached out further for it and said, "Give it." As I did so, I blinked, and by the time I reopened my eyes, he was gone. The spot of the bed was there, sitting lifted back into a place, but the imprint of somebody sitting there was still present. I told my mom in the morning, and she was slightly freaked out, but assured me it was just a dream. Fast forward 5 years later, I had a girlfriend over to do homework. After homework, she took a nap while she waited for her parents to pick her up. When they arrived, I tried waking her up to let her know. I nudged her and she opened her eyes so suddenly, already looking in the direction of the corner of the room where the wall meets the ceiling, lifting her fingers and pointed. And as fast as she woke, she fell asleep again. I attempted to wake her up again. She came to full consciousness and I asked her what the hell was that about and explained what she just did. She said, "Oh, I thought I was dreaming, but up in the wall I saw a little boy with no eyes, just there, in some sort of Spider-Man pose, staring at me." That's when I freaked out, and I told her the story for the first time when I saw what I guessed was the same kid. Fast forward another 5 years, still with the same girlfriend, and by this time we had a 2-year-old daughter. We were living in my old bedroom at my parents' house. My daughter would wake up at the same time every night and started talking. For a while, we thought it was normal baby things, until I noticed it was almost the same conversation every night. I playfully asked her one night, who was she talking to every night? She responded, "A little boy. He talks to me. He's nice. He's lost and looking for his mommy." I told my mom what happened the next morning, and before I got to tell her what I thought, she said, "I remember when that happened to you. Then your girlfriend? I have no idea what that is." By then, neither my girlfriend or I have seen the little boy after our first encounter, but my daughter continued her nightly conversations until we got our own place later that year. The story was by K. Mendo Ford. Eyeless kids. Have you guys heard about the white-eyed kids? White-eyed kids. Okay, so pretty much all white. I believe that's what it is. There's a story behind it, and if it's true, I definitely don't want to put you guys in any danger. But if you guys are curious to know what these kids are, well, I think they're called black-eyed kids. I can't remember. One of them too. Look them up on YouTube. But do them at your own time. Okay, I know about them, and I certainly don't want to put you guys in any danger if the stories are true. Yesterday we were talking about imaginary friends. How we as adults have forgotten we might have had some sort of connection with an imaginary friend when we were small. Maybe we did, but since our mind just developed, we forget. We forget a couple things. How far do you guys remember? How far ago do you guys remember when you were a kid? Like what memories do you guys have of when you were a kid? For me, it was the first story I told you guys on episode 1 about the lady in white back in Mexico. This is another personal story of mine, and it was still back in Mexico. Okay, I do not know the details of it, because it was during the hurricane that hit Mexico back in 96 or 97. I can't remember. And at the time, I was 6 years old. But in that event, I could remember everything. I could remember I could remember the screams of when people would just lay there helplessly or get dragged by the river by where I used to live. I could still remember the sound the water made every time it would hit rocks. I could still remember the water rising up all the way to my house, and my mother would tell me, "Don't freak out. Just get your personal things and let's go." I don't know who remembers a show back in the day called Street Sharks or Gargoyles. Anybody remember? To me, it was a very popular show, and I do wish they would have reruns of it. But we can't have that. We can't have nice things, okay? But I remember that day, or that night actually, when the hurricane hit. I remember taking 2 toys. One of them being a street shark toy, and another one being a gargoyle toy. Now, first, before I go on, I do apologize for any background noise, which I do live, like I said, in an apartment, and the street behind me, they use it as like a drag strip, and hey, I don't mind. I like racing as much as the next person, but come on, don't be rude. Anyways, I remember that night when my mom told me not to freak out and to just get my important things. Those are the 2 things that I remember taking: a street shark toy and a gargoyle toy. I love that damn series. I love those damn series so much. Okay, we were inseparable. But okay, this is how the layout of the house was. Okay, we just picture this. There's a river. There's a river crossing, right? And then you would take a couple stairs up, and to the left there would be my house. So it would be like around like 20 to 30 steps upwards, and my old house would be right there. Okay, so that wall that separated us from the river, it was pretty big, and it was pretty tall, and when the hurricane hit, you can just imagine the water rising all the way up to my house. So if you would go a couple stairs more upwards, you would find yourself in the main street. And I remember the soldiers at the time telling us to go to the nearest university because everybody would be safe there. It was away from the river, and it was well elevated, well roomed, and there was enough room for everybody who lived around the area. And so we did. We stayed there the night, and when the hurricane left, it was calm before after the storm, right? I mean, usually it's calm before the storm, and now it was just like a sunny day the other day. But the river was still, you know, overfilling my house at the time, and it gets worse because we went downtown. I forgot where it was, but it was downtown pretty much, and all you can smell was death. You could see the corpses coming out of the bodies, and just imagine a 6-year-old me seeing all this. It was something else. I could still remember to this day how damped and just how grotesque everything looked. A lot of people died that day, and fortunately for me and my mother, you know, we were the lucky ones. We just had some water in our house. Makes you think if we are truly safe, you know? We do everything right. If you believe in karma, you know, you do everything right, you are good, so you can receive good, right? Don't do bad if you do believe in karma, because it is not nice. Let me take a drink of my water, and we will continue with the third story of the same website, theoccultmuseum.com. All right. This next story is called The Whispers. And it goes. This is a story I don't often tell. I promise. I sincerely that this has scared me for life. And although I have looked into psychological explanation for what I heard and natural explanation for what occurred, they remained unsatisfactory. When I was a kid, I was scared of the dark. I swore to my mother I heard voices in it. They were not evil, but they were not familiar, and so they scared me. It was not uncommon in the middle of the night for me to wake up and hear whispers, as I would call them. When asking my mom, she figured they were just bumps in the night and typical kids' nightmare material. I tried often to explain to her that it was more than that, that they sounded different from one another, the way people voices do. And some nights, I would get so scared from these whispers that I would sleep in my mom's bed with her. It was an added bonus that the bathroom was directly outside of her bedroom door for my late night tingles. I should add at this point that when walking out into the hall to go to the bathroom, you look directly down the stairs that would lead you into my living room and the first floor, as my mom's bedroom was in the second. On one such night, around Christmas, I awoke and felt the need to relieve myself. I walked out from the door and distinctly heard a phrased, "Look." And to my astonish, a red light, almost like a spotlight, was cast upon the wall at the very bottom of the stairs. The light had no other sources. It was by itself, and I was transfixed by it. Being a little kid, and it only being a few days from Christmas, I knew what was this light. It was Santa. How else could he get into my house? To know I was being a good boy? I was so excited I began walking down the stairs to greet him, picking up my pace after the second step as it began to creep up the wall and fade into darkness in my living room. That's when I heard him. A very strong, masculine voice, different from the first. Not at all like my father's. Not to say he's masculine. It was just distinctly different. It said, "Stop. Right now. Go back up those stairs." I listened, turned around, and what happened next, I'm not sure. I would believe if someone had told me the same story. After reaching the top of the stairs, I heard a very loud crash that sent me running back to my mother's bed, where I jumped straight under the covers and stayed there the whole night. When we woke up the next morning, the Pianciera lights, little Christmas flower lights that glowed red, my mother had put on the railing down the stairs, were pulled straight down to the bottom of the stairs, some broken from what seemed like a fearful tear, lying in a single pile. The dry sink in my living room had fallen from the wall. My mother could not explain it. My father was worried he had been the victim of a home invasion. My sister was crying. There was nothing missing. Nobody had broken in. There did not seem to be any reason this had happened. And then I saw it. I kept quiet about it because I was so afraid I could not force words out of my mouth. There, on the edge of the wooden dry sink, which had been facing up, were 3 indentations where the finish on the wood had been worn. Almost as if in forceful grip, something down there had grabbed it and threw it down. That was what the bang was. I was mortified. After that day, I never heard a single voice again. I do not like to imagine what was waiting downstairs for me that night. The story was by Mom's Day Prepper. Christmas time should be a happy time, right? And yet, this boy, believing that he had seen Santa, gets a crash down the stairs with a voice that doesn't belong to anybody he knows. My great grandfather, I believe. He didn't tell me, but he kept telling his kids, and soon it got to my ears from my grandmother, my mom. She said that he would say, "Don't be afraid of the dead. Be more afraid of the living." Rest in peace, wherever he is. Okay? He was a good man. Don't be afraid of the dead. Be afraid of the living. You know what? I feel like having a guest. And maybe that's what we're going to do either on the first week of this podcast, or it would be on the middle of the month podcast. I'll have a guest on the podcast, and we will share stories, and I will do my best to translate them in English as much as I can. Okay. But yes, voices, disembodied voices, and stories of being a kid. When I was a kid and saw that grotesque sight of bodies just being piled and coming out of the ground, and the smell of moist dirt and death, it was I don't want to say it was haunting for me. It felt natural, I guess you can say. I mean, I wasn't scared. I wasn't panicking and covering my eyes. In fact, I saw what could happen. Salud. I saw what could happen with Mother Nature a lot of people, okay, a lot of people get mad when certain things happen with Mother Nature. But how could we get mad if Mother Nature, it's a force on her own? We can't control Mother Nature, otherwise we would be in a calmer place, wouldn't you think? I like to think of Mother Nature as a human body, or Earth as a human body. You know, when there's earthquakes, the Earth shakes underneath you. But if if you pay attention to science class, I'm not trying to teach here, okay? Because this podcast isn't about teaching. But when earthquake happens, the Earth and the plates underneath it tend to move around, and that pretty much causes the earthquake, right? So what I like to think about it is not as a destructive force, but more as a way of the Earth comforting herself, right? Like, for example, have you ever fell asleep on one side of your body, but and then all of a sudden you wake up either in the middle of the night or a couple hours later to switch positions because your side just feels so numb if you don't really, if you don't, like, if you're not used to sleeping on that side, so you move around and you shift yourself, right, to get comfortable. To me, that's what it is. Whenever there's an earthquake, the Earth is just trying to get comfortable again. So instead of looking away from the disasters and on the unfortunate victims of either a tsunami or an earthquake, or like myself, a hurricane, just look at it and be more careful, I guess. So don't get mad at Mother Nature. That's what I'm trying to say, okay? Because we can't stop an unstoppable force. She is who she is, and we're pretty much renting out her place. So we gotta take care of her, okay? Do your part. Like in school, right? The three R's, I believe: reuse, recycle, and what was the other one? Reuse, reduce, and recycle. I guess, you know what I mean. There it is. I do that, and hopefully, Mother Nature would be happier next time. This next story is called "Behind the Shower Curtains." Now, before we get into the story, every time I hear, when I saw this title, I immediately think of any horror movie that I've seen, right? Like where you would see a certain lady. It's usually ladies, all right? Unfortunately, us men, we don't have that. What's the word I'm looking for? We're not in that level of prestige to have our own shower scenes. Damn. Well, anyways, but yes, it always reminds me of that. It reminds me of that behind the shower scenes. I believe it was on Halloween, like one of the Halloween movies, where she's like taking a shower and all of a sudden the curtains just like fly open, and she screams and the killer just gets her. Blah blah blah. Anyways, let's continue with the story. In 7th grade, my friends and I went over to Mary's house, intent on playing with her mom's Ouija board that night. None of us had played one before. Mary's mom was an extremely spiritual person who believed in energies, witchcraft, stuff like that. Before we used the board, Mary warned us that her mom would be really pissed if she found out that we were playing with it, because Ouija boards can attract spirits and bad ones into the home. With full knowledge of this, we decided to proceed anyways. The Ouija board was like the average Ouija board you had ever seen, along with the usual characteristics: the alphabet, yes, no, and goodbye. There was an entire array of symbols and signs that were all arranged in a circle. This was some seriously intricate stuff. We started just goofing around and communicating with random spirits. here and there, until we finally met one that had us in tears and entire sleepless nights. First, we asked if the spirit was a man or a woman, to which he replied, M-A-N. Then we asked how he was killed, M-U-R-D-E-R. That freaked us out only a little bit, but we were mostly excited. All of a sudden, before we even ask another question, in the glass goes into the eyeball symbol and spells out I-N, and goes to the water symbol. We didn't have a clue what that meant. It wasn't too scary until he spelled out SHOWER, and my best friend realized that the spirit was trying to tell us to look in the shower. We froze. I've never been so scared in my entire life, especially sitting directly in front of the bathroom with the shower curtain all the way closed, faced in my direction. We all screamed and promised on our friendship that we would not move it ourselves. We didn't move it ourselves. Very important promise. I felt like I was being watched, and even though so too, it was only four of us, and I believe with all my heart that none of them had moved it because we were all too nervous to do so. I'll never use a Ouija board again because of how crazy and intense that night was. I understand that people say Ouija boards are controlled by our subconscious, but fuck that. I knew. I felt something in that room with us. I know it was dangerous. This was by Lemon and Water. There it is. Just as I say that we, like us guys, don't have shower scenes, we just got one on this story. There was a shower scene murder. Boom. Chalk one up for the boys back home. But aside from that, why would you play the Ouija board? Why would you ever even consider in touching one? Hell, if I see you bringing in a Ouija board in my house, you're out. Because sorry about that. Had a little freak out in the back. My mom telling me that there was a spider on her. Hold up. Crisis averted. It was just a little jumping spider, and she freaked out. Okay, listen. I used to be scared of spiders. I still am, but not to a degree where I would punch holes in the wall. She was about to scream too. That would have been perfect timing, right? Perfect timing when we were talking about Ouija boards. Anyways, so Ouija boards, you bring one into my house, consider a friendship over. Because I don't mess with those. I do believe in them, and whether you move them or not, you don't play it. All right, don't play the Ouija board. It's, like if you're going to school and you see the cool kids saying, "Hey, Jasmine, you want to play the Ouija board?" Chad is gonna be there. Yo, screw Chad. Be like, nah. You know what? I don't want to be that cool anymore. Don't take it. I would rather be called a wuss than stay with that, because I've read a bunch of stories, I've seen a bunch of videos, and I've seen a bunch of movies based on true stories that has something to do with the Ouija board, and it ain't right. Don't play the Ouija board, guys. I mean, it's not worth the attention you seek, because in the long run, even if it's not real, just like we were talking about yesterday, our minds are so powerful that we can manifest whatever it is that we're thinking. If we think, oh, this toy car is gonna move off the shelf, and we concentrate so much that all of a sudden we turn around and we turn back, and it moved because our minds are so powerful. Maybe, and like I said yesterday, maybe that's why we only use 10%. We only use 10% of our minds. And by the way, there it is, the motorcycle. Very rude. Very, very rude, people. But we can't do anything. It is the outside world after all. And we are here in the... I don't know what to call it. A den, I guess. I don't know. Anyways. But yes, don't play the Ouija board. That was my dog. Trying to be cute. But don't play the Ouija board. That's pretty much all I'm trying to say. Do not do it. Even if Chad is around, don't do it. If the popular kids tell you, hey, you guys want to be popular, don't do it. I care for your well-being. And trust me, you don't want to do it. Let me see. The last personal story that I will tell of yours truly. I don't want to say a lot of personal stories because I want to spread them out as much as I can along October. So I used to be let me see. I think I was going to a community college at the time, and once again, I was living in East LA. But this time, I wasn't living in Chicago Street. No, I was living in the actual Cesar E. Chavez Street, almost close enough to be in the LA River. Okay, and in this house, we used to share the whole house with my aunt and my uncle and her boyfriend. Okay, so my aunt and uncle are brothers and sisters, and they're the daughter and son of my grandmother, which is my mom. Okay, just so it won't be confused. And my mother is pretty much my English, please. Shiaki, please. My grandmother is my adoptive mother. Oh, so hard to say. But I call her mom because of respect, okay? So, no more confusion. Hopefully, okay? So, let's keep going. My aunt has a bunch of kids. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 at the time, I think. And we would all sleep in this one house. And my uncle, and of course me and my mom. So one night I remember playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 a lot, and I would stay up at night. And I'm not talking about like 12 at night, I'm talking about like 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning at night. Have long sessions with an old friend that I had. So one night I remember it was like around 2:50, and I told him, hey, you know what, at 3 in the morning I'm gonna get off because I want to go to sleep. And he said, yeah, okay, it's cool. So we were playing and 3 hit, right? And all of a sudden I hear from outside my door somebody running up and down the house, right? And immediately, because my aunt has so many kids and some of them are like kids, like infants, right? Like toddlers. Not toddlers, like little kids, going to elementary, probably like preschool level. I thought to my head, you know what? Why are they running around? You know, they're going to wake up the whole house. And it's like 3 in the morning too. What the hell? So I shrugged it off and I kept playing. 3 in the morning passed and I was still playing, and I would still hear them running around the house. And all of a sudden I hear them run again, and I told my friend, you know what? Somebody's running up and down the house, and I want to know who it is. If I hear it again, I'm going to get off like real quick and I'm going to check. I'm going to swing open the door and check. And just as I heard the footsteps coming towards my door, I got up really quick and opened that door, and what I saw was nothing. The footsteps stopped dead in front of me, and there was nothing in front of me. To this day, I I kind of regret staying up at night, so late at night. After that day, okay, so this is pretty much a story that ties to this one, okay? So after that day, I didn't learn my lesson, just sort of say, but I still kept playing up until like 3, 4 in the morning. And then like a week later, okay, how familiar are you guys with the tale of La Llorona? Okay, in Spanish, it's called La Llorona. In English, I believe it's called the Wailer, right? But that's so many variables. Call her La Llorona, which pretty much means the weeping woman, or the weeping, I guess, right? But it just means a weeping woman. So there are so many stories of this lady, that pretty much all ties to the same thing. Her kids were drowned, and now she is damned to walk at night, looking for her kids. So, but the only way you will see her, according to the stories, is if you live next to the river. And let me tell you guys that, okay, first of all, I know how a person, like, I know how a person would scream. Like, like when somebody screams, you immediately think, oh, that's somebody right there. So somebody either got scared or scaring somebody else, or they had an accident and screamed. So you immediately think, okay, that's a human scream. But I 100% guarantee you guys that one night, living in East LA, heard La Llorona. And I am not kidding you. I was so close to jumping right out of my skin, because her wails are so just, oh man, I don't know how to explain it. It just gives me chills just talking about it right now. It's one of those things where I would say you have to experience it. You have to experience it yourself to know what I'm talking about. But I'm hoping to God you guys don't experience what I've heard, because it was just so, I don't know. I just don't know how to explain how she sounded. It was a sound that I don't want to hear ever again in my life. I mean, hey, I'm as tough as nails when it comes, you know what I'm saying? I mean, hit me with kryptonite, I'll like whack it off your hands. But that night I was really, really, really scared. Let's read one more story from the same occult museum. This website has 7 stories, I believe. Let me check. And we are on our 5th one. Yeah, okay. And tomorrow we'll read the rest, and we'll see where it goes. Let me take one last sip of water, and we'll continue. By the way, I'm sorry. By the way, hopefully you guys are having a really good evening tonight. And if you're listening to the podcast, okay, let me just say this on every podcast. If you're listening to my podcast in a car, before you get out of the parking spot, put me on speaker. All right? I'm pretty sure your phone is loud enough, or connect me via Bluetooth to your speakers, because I don't want to see you guys driving and listening to the phone up in your face. It's not fun. Alright? I've had so many incidents where people would almost run me over because they were so busy in their phones. please put me on speaker, leave me in the passenger seat, or if you have a passenger and say, hey, I want to listen to the After Dark podcast, go to his YouTube channel. Tell that person to go to the thing. Don't do it yourself, all right? If Just give her the phone. You trust your woman, you trust your man, give him the phone, all right? Don't do bad things so you won't have any bad conscience, if that's what I'm trying to say, okay? So anyways, the story is called The Little Girl Who Lives in the Walls. When my wife and I bought our first house, an old Victorian style built in the 50s, almost every night we heard that sound like a kid's footsteps running down the stairs, hallways, and other random sounds. My wife mentioned it to me, one of the neighbors, and my wife mentioned it to one of the neighbors, and they said it was probably just peacocks on the roof. The house backed up to a conversation area where wild peacocks lived, and they would occasionally get up on the roof. That answer made sense, so we basically got used to it and eventually ignored it. Less than a year later, our son was born, and when was and when he was one, when he was one, he would balance all of his toys on top of other toys and made them spin. Literally found the center of balance of various toys and would walk in a circle around the room, giving each a gentle touch to keep it rotating. It was the weirdest and coolest thing I've ever seen. When he was 2 or 3, we would hear him talking in his room at night, and one night I asked who he was talking to. He said, Tracy. I asked, who's Tracy? And he said, the girl who lives in the wall. She's usually nice, but sometimes she scares me. He described the girl with brown hair and yellow dress. She would play with him sometimes and occasionally wake him up at night, but he didn't seem bothered by any of it. Just startled sometimes. He would talk about her once in a while, but it wasn't a common occurrence. A couple years later, we had added onto the house and moved the master bedroom downstairs, switching the kids' room around. Our youngest was now in his old room and about ready to transition from crib to toddler bed. She had always been a sound sleeper, but she cried almost every night in the room. Her first night in the toddler bed, we heard a loud thud, following by screaming and rushing to her room, thinking she had fell out of bed. She was on the other side of the room, got her calmed down and back to bed, and it happened again the next night. So we ended up switching the kids' room back, and they were fine. We looked up the history of the house, but didn't find anything about any missing little girls or anyone named Tracy that had lived there. Eventually, our son stopped talking about her, and a few years later, I ended up taking a job with another company, and we moved. The house was empty for a few months after we moved, and the neighbor across the street called my wife one day and said, about a week after we left, she thought she saw our daughter looking out the window. So she waved to her, and then she remembered we didn't live there anymore. The story was by Ron Rule. What did I say? What did I say about little kids running up the hall? That happened to me, and I believe it. Every time so I live in a second story building. I live in an apartment. I like living in apartments. It's nice. You get to see different people if you live long enough here in a certain apartment. And one thing I like doing before going into a house, I tell my mom to bless the house, whether it be, an apartment or an actual house. That way, whatever or whoever's here can just stay calm, right? I mean, that's the theory behind it. That's the theory behind blessing a house. You would usually go to a priest and say, hey, if you guys have time, can you do me a solid? I'll put some money in your basket on Sunday, but can you guys come over to my house and bless it, please? So, there is a true story about bodies being found in houses, and, well, unfortunately for this one, it has the same story, but, I don't know. This was a fun podcast today. This episode was fun. It reminded me of, certain events that I thought I'd forgotten, but, they're still in my head. And it reminded me of the scream that I heard at night, but it's always fun. With that being said, guys, thank you guys for coming to episode 4 of the After Dark podcast. I really do appreciate it. If you guys stayed in the live stream, I 100% appreciate you. And if you guys watch it on YouTube or replay, it's the same thing. I 100% appreciate you. You guys are the best. In the old fashion, I tend to recommend a movie, and for tonight, keeping the vampire theme that we had last night about Fright Night, which, by the way, again, is a good movie. Tonight, I recommend you guys watching The Lost Boys. Alright, Lost Boys, a 1987 mystery teen film that goes for an hour and 38 minutes. So good movie. If you guys have heard the phrase death by radio, you know what I'm talking about. It's such a good movie. Yes, maybe you have seen it before, but it's one of those movies where I don't get tired of rewatching it, because it's it's one of my favorite ones. The dog is my favorite. Nanook. Such a cute husky. Oh, such an adorable little douche. Yes, so I do recommend that one movie. The director is by Joel Schumacher. Oh, I don't know. The feature song is by Cry Little Sister. The story is by James Jeremias and Janice Fitcher. Buzzcraft Gaming, thank you for coming into the stream, and it is very spooky. Like I am mentioning right now, the movie that I am recommending for tonight is The Lost Boys, the 1987 film. I don't really think there is a remake, but the old ones, it's an oldie but a goodie. Trust me, alright? Let me see. The screenplay is by James Jeremias again, and Janice Fischer again, and Jeffrey Boehm. So, go check it out. I don't know if it's on Netflix, but if it is, check it out. Alright? If you find it on DVD, buy it. It is worth the $5 that Walmart wants for it. Okay? Anyways, guys, with that being said, thank you guys for coming. It's the end of the podcast. Buzzcraft Gaming, thank you for coming. I appreciate you, my dude. You're the best. Hope to see you in another episode. If you guys want to follow me on Twitter, you can do so. I'll leave a link in the description below. You can chat with me. Send pictures. Keep it family friendly, please. Send pictures. Send memes. I like to laugh. Also, if you guys have any scary stories, you can send them to me over on Twitter with the hashtag #TheAfterDarkPodcast or the abbreviation hashtag TADP, and I will read them in the next episode because I want this podcast to be interactive. So if you guys have any stories, I will read them and I will give credit where credit is due. So go write your stories, send them over to Twitter. I'll leave a link in the description after this podcast, of course. Also, if you guys want to follow me on Instagram, you can do so as well. I am a digital artist and a traditional artist. I am a mixed artist. I was going to say a mixed martial artist. I guess that works, right? I am a mixed martial artist. Okay. I draw in digital and traditional. I do post every Wednesday and Saturday from 8 to 9 a.m. California time. But since I am partaking in this Inktober challenge, I am posting every day at random times because, I mean, like I said, I have stuff to do. I got things to do, and, I want to skate a little bit. I need my exercise. I got to lose weight, okay? Damn. And yeah, so the pictures are posted in random times, but there will be one each day. So one drawing each day. And right now, I am trying to get my design out, which is for my project called Celestial. Like the stars, the cosmos, the planets, the sun, the solar system, all that stuff. All that stuff in the outside world, or outside of our world. So if you guys want to check it out, you can do so. Once again, the stories that we were reading for tonight, it came from the website called theoccultmuseum.com. Okay? And this one, does it have... Wow. It does have a lot of things to say about it. It has a lot of things. Let me see. I think it just says theoccultmuseum.com/7 sinister true ghost stories. Right? Let me check. True. Okay, yeah. 7 sinister true ghost stories to read in the dark / but it's not all together. It's you have to space it with the divider and such. I don't know, but that's the website that we were reading from the stories from, and we got to the 5th story. So tomorrow we'll read the last 2, and of course more of my personal encounters with the unknown. And like I did say, maybe on the first week, or maybe, oh, you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, maybe the last day on October 31st, I'll have a special guest, sharing her stories. So that would be cool. And I'll try my best to translate. All right. So once again, thank you guys for coming to the live stream. And if you guys are watching it on YouTube, thank you guys. I really do appreciate you guys. Are the best. Buzzcraft Gaming. That is so hard to say, man. But thank you for coming. Thank you for coming tonight. Even if you just wrote one little thing, very spooky, I really do appreciate you so much. And I also see that you follow me on Twitter too. I mean, Instagram. Thank you for the likes. I really do appreciate it. Okay, so I was going to do my outro. The motorcycle decides to pass by. And on that note, remember to always look under your bed. Check the closet for monsters. And always, and I mean always, look behind you. Because you may never know who is watching from afar. Peace out, everybody. Have a great night. And have a safe and awesome weekend.